It is 3 in the morning. The Sea of Galilee is black. Not dark. Black. The kind of black that has weight to it, that presses against your face, that makes the space between your hand and the wood of the oar disappear. The kind of black where a man can row for hours and not be certain he is moving at all. 12 men are in this boat. Fishermen, most of them. Men who have grown up on this water, who know its moods the way you know the moods of someone you have lived with your whole life. And they are afraid. They have been rowing for 9 hours. The wind is against them. It has been against them since they pushed off from the eastern shore, since the last light died, since the crowd disappeared behind them into the dark. 9 hours, 3 to 4 miles of open water, and the wind pushing back against every stroke. Here's what most people miss. This is not a random night. This is not simply a storm that happened to catch the disciples on the water. This night has a shape to it. This night has been building since morning, since a messenger arrived with a piece of news so bad that a grown man walked away from a crowd of 5,000 people and went looking for a place to grieve alone. John the Baptist was dead. Herod Antipas had taken his head, not for a crime, not for a rebellion, for a dance and a promise made in front of the wrong people. Herod's stepdaughter had pleased him at a banquet, and he had promised her anything she wanted, up to half his kingdom. The girl went to her mother, and her mother, Herodias, a woman who had wanted John dead for 2 years, told her daughter exactly what to ask for: a head, on a plate. John's disciples carried the body away and went to tell Jesus. Matthew says Jesus tried to withdraw by boat to a desolate place. He needed to be alone. He had known John before either of them was born. Their mothers had known each other, had embraced in a hill town in Judea when both of them were still carrying the children who would change the world. John was not just a prophet to Jesus. John was the voice that had announced him, the man who had stood in the Jordan River and said, "After me comes the one whose sandals I am not worthy to carry." And now John was gone, but the crowd followed. They always followed. Matthew says they came on foot from the towns, tracking the boat along the shoreline, waiting for him on the other side. And when Jesus stepped out of the boat and saw them, thousands of them, Matthew says, like sheep without a shepherd, he did not send them away. He had compassion on them. He healed their sick. And when the day ran out, when the disciples came and said the people need to go home and eat, Jesus fed them, all of them, 5,000 men, plus women and children, with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He fed them until they were full, and there were 12 baskets of broken pieces left over. And then he made the disciples get into the boat. Stay with me, because that word matters. Matthew uses a word that carries force. He compelled them, or made them, depending on your translation. The Greek is strong. Jesus did not suggest they leave. He sent them, immediately, across the water, while he dismissed the crowd. Why? John's gospel gives us a hint. The people, after the feeding, wanted to take Jesus by force and make him king. The political pressure was real. The messianic expectation was at a boiling point. And Jesus, this Jesus who wept over a tomb, who walked away from crowds to pray, who refused every shortcut the enemy ever offered him, sent his disciples away, sent them into the dark, across the water, into the wind, and went up the mountain alone to pray. This is the only place in the Gospels where Jesus is recorded going to pray immediately after a death. The death of the man who had announced him, the night when the crowd wanted to crown him, the night after the miracle with the bread and fish. He went up the mountain, and he prayed alone, and the darkness covered him, and his 12 closest friends were 3 miles away, on black water, rowing against the wind. One of those 12 men will later tell this story to his students. One of them will make sure it gets written down. But he will leave something out. He will tell the story almost all the way to the end, and then stop just before the most embarrassing part. We will come back to that. The fourth watch begins at 3 in the morning. The Romans invented this division of the night. 4 watches, 4 shifts, 4 stretches of darkness assigned to soldiers who had to stay awake when every instinct in the human body screamed to sleep. The fourth watch was the worst of them. The dead hours. The hours when the mind plays tricks, when shadows move, when exhausted men see things at the edge of their vision and cannot be certain whether the thing is real or whether the darkness has finally gotten inside their heads. The disciples have been rowing since sundown. Think about what 9 hours on open water does to a body. Your hands have stopped feeling the oar. Your shoulders have a deep, bone-level ache that no amount of shifting your grip will fix. Your eyes are raw from the salt spray. You have been staring into black water for so long that the line between the sea and the sky has dissolved, and you are no longer certain which direction is which, only that the wind is still in your face, and the shore you left is behind you, and the shore you are trying to reach has not appeared. And then someone screams. Matthew records it plainly. They saw him walking on the sea, and they were terrified. The Greek word the disciples use when they cry out is phantasma. Phantom, ghost, not a man, not a miracle, a haunting, something the sea had sent up from its depths to terrify them in the dead hours. The Sea of Galilee in Jewish thought was not simply a lake. The thalassa, the deep water, carried the weight of ancient dread. In the Hebrew imagination, the deep was where chaos lived, where the uncreated darkness pressed against the edge of the world. You did not walk on it. Nothing walked on it. Nothing that was still alive. They screamed. And here is where the story does something that should stop you completely. Jesus speaks. He says, and Matthew records this in Greek, ego eimi. 2 words. Translators have rendered them a dozen different ways across a dozen centuries. It is I. Don't be afraid. Take heart. But the Greek is ego eimi, I am. The same 2 words that appear in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures that every Jewish person in the first century read. When God speaks to Moses from a burning bush on a mountain in the middle of a desert, Moses asks for a name, and the voice says, I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent you. On the water, in the dark, in the fourth watch. While 12 terrified men stare at something they are convinced is a ghost rising from the deep, Jesus of Nazareth speaks the name of God. Not calm down, not it's me, not don't worry, I can explain. I am. He says it the way you say something that requires no argument. The way you say something that has always been true and will always be true, and the fact that you are currently standing on the surface of a lake in the middle of a storm at 3 in the morning changes exactly nothing about it. And this is where it gets remarkable. Peter opens his mouth. Now, you have to understand who Peter is in this moment. Peter is not the Pope. Peter is not the first bishop of Rome. Peter is a fisherman from Capernaum who has been awake for at least 20 hours, who has rowed 9 hours against the wind, who just screamed ghost at his rabbi, and who is now somehow, in some recess of his exhausted, terrified mind, forming a theological argument. Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Read that again slowly. Peter does not say, Lord, can you come to us? Peter does not say, Lord, make the storm stop. Peter does not say, Lord, is that really you? Peter says, if you are who I think you are, then what you are doing right now is possible. And if it is possible for you, then it might be possible for me, and I want to find out. This is the most reckless prayer in the New Testament. It is also one of the most theologically precise. Peter has understood something in this moment that a seminary degree might not teach you. He has understood that the miracles of Jesus are not magic tricks performed by a divine being for a human audience. They are invitations. They are demonstrations of what becomes possible when the kingdom of God intersects with the broken physics of a fallen world. And Peter, exhausted, terrified, salt-crusted Peter, wants in. He is asking to participate, not to watch, to step into the same impossible as his rabbi. Jesus says one word, come. Not are you sure? Not think carefully about this. Not let me explain the risks. Come. The Greek is immediate, present tense, active. An invitation with no expiration date and no fine print. And Peter gets out of the boat. Put yourself in that boat for a moment. You are one of the 11 men watching this happen. You have known Peter for years, fished beside him, argued with him, eaten with him, watched him say exactly the wrong thing, at exactly the wrong moment, more times than you can count. And right now, Peter is swinging his legs over the side of the boat. Right now, Peter's feet are leaving the wood. Right now, Peter is standing, on the surface of the Sea of Galilee at 3 a.m, in the middle of a storm, and the water is holding him. This is not a metaphor. This is not a vision. This is not something that happened in a dream, or a parable, or a moment of spiritual imagination. The water, the black wind-churned, chaos-haunted water that the disciples have been fighting for 9 hours, is holding the weight of a full-grown fisherman from Capernaum. He takes a step, then another. Matthew does not tell us how many steps Peter took before it went wrong. He does not give us a number, a distance, a duration. He simply says Peter walked on the water and came toward Jesus. And then, he noticed the wind. Here's what most people miss about that detail. The wind had been there the entire time. It was there when the disciples pushed off from the eastern shore at sundown. It was there for all 9 hours of rowing. It was there when the figure appeared on the water. It was there when Peter climbed out of the boat. The wind did not suddenly get worse. The storm did not suddenly intensify. What changed was not the wind. What changed was what Peter was looking at. The moment his eyes moved, from the face of Jesus to the surface of the water, from the one who had spoken the name of God to the waves that logic said should be swallowing him whole, the water remembered that Peter was a man, and men do not walk on water. And the sea, which had held him for 11 seconds, or 11 steps, or 11 heartbeats, whatever it was, released him. He went down fast. Not gradually. Not a slow sinking where he had time to think, to course correct, to swim back to the surface and try again. Fast. The way a stone goes down. The way something heavy goes down when the thing supporting it is suddenly gone. Matthew uses a word that means to be swallowed by water, to go under, to sink, and there is no ambiguity in it. Peter was in the water. He was going down, and the disciples in the boat were watching. And Peter, sinking, drowning, failing, in front of everyone, prayed 3 words. Lord, save me. That is the entire prayer. Not, Lord, I'm sorry I doubted. Not, Lord, I should have known better. Not, Lord, I understand now that my faith was insufficient and I will do better next time. 3 words. Subject, verb, object. The most compressed, most desperate, most theologically loaded 3 words in the New Testament. Lord, save me. And this is the part of the story that should wreck you, because of what happens next. Not what Jesus says, what Jesus does, before he says anything, before the gentle rebuke, before the question about faith, before any of it. Matthew records that Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of Peter. Immediately. The Greek word is eutheos. Right away. At once. Without delay, without hesitation, without a single breath of divine deliberation about whether Peter had earned this, whether Peter deserved this, whether Peter's faith had been sufficient to merit a rescue. The hand was already moving before the prayer finished. The hand was already moving. It is almost possible to believe, before Peter's mouth opened at all. That hand has been reaching for sinking people for a very long time. Pay attention to this, because the sequence matters enormously. The rescue comes first. The question comes second. Jesus lifts Peter out of the water, and then, only then, with Peter's feet back on something solid, with Peter's lungs working again, with Peter's eyes looking into the face of the one who just pulled him out of the deep, Jesus asks the question, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" Most people hear that as a rebuke, a scolding, a disappointed teacher marking a failed exam. And there is correction in it. Jesus is not pretending the doubt didn't happen. But hear the tenderness underneath it. This is not a courtroom. This is not a verdict. This is a man who just pulled his friend out of the water, asking, with genuine curiosity, "What happened in there?" "You were doing it, Peter. You were actually doing it. What did you see when you looked away from me?" The wind. He saw the wind. He saw the size of the problem instead of the size of the one who had invited him into it. He measured the storm against himself. And of course the math didn't work. It never works when you are the denominator. The storm was bigger than Peter. The storm was bigger than Peter's faith. The storm was bigger than Peter's courage and his theology and his 11 seconds of impossible walking on black water. But the storm was not bigger than the voice that said, "Come." It never was. They climb into the boat together. Matthew does not linger on this moment. He does not describe the mechanics of it, how Peter's weight shifted, how Jesus steadied him, how the other 11 reached over the side to help pull them in. He simply says they got into the boat. 2 words in the Greek. And then Matthew writes the next sentence, and it is one of the most quietly devastating sentences in the entire gospel. The wind ceased. Not gradually. Not a slow dying down the way storms usually end. The way the weather works when it is simply weather. First the gusts spacing out, then the waves flattening, then the surface going still over the course of an hour, while the clouds pull back and the stars come through. None of that. The wind ceased. Past tense. Completed action. One moment the storm was there, and the next moment it was not. And the Sea of Galilee, the black, violent, chaos-haunted sea that had been fighting 12 men for 9 hours, was flat. Still. Silent. Think about what that silence sounded like after 9 hours of wind. The disciples in that boat had grown up on this water. They knew what storms were. They knew what it felt like when a squall passed, the gradual easing, the slow return of calm. the way the body unclenches over time as the danger recedes. They had never felt anything like this. One moment the wind, the next moment nothing. One moment the world was violent and loud, and the next moment the world was so quiet you could hear the water against the hull. And in that silence something broke open in them. Matthew says they worshipped him, not thanked him, not applauded him, not turned to each other with relieved laughter and said, "Well, that was something, wasn't it?" They worshipped him. The Greek word is prosokineson, to fall down before, to bow the face to the ground, to offer the posture of a creature before its creator. These were Jewish men, fishermen from Galilee, men who had been raised in synagogues, where the Shema was prayed every morning and every night. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Men for whom the idea of worshiping anything other than the God of Abraham was not simply wrong, but was the deepest possible betrayal of everything they were. They worshipped him, and then they spoke, "Truly you are the Son of God." This is the first time this confession appears in Matthew's Gospel. Jesus has healed the sick, cast out demons, preached the Sermon on the Mount, fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And this is the moment. Not the miracles in the synagogue, not the transfiguration, which hasn't happened yet, not the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Here, in a boat, in the dark, 3 miles from shore, soaking wet, with the smell of the storm still on them and Peter still dripping and the water flat and silent all around them. Truly you are the Son of God. Now hold that thought, because there is something else happening in this boat that Matthew does not say directly, but that every careful reader of the Gospels eventually notices. Peter is in this boat. Peter who got out. Peter who walked. Peter who sank. Peter who prayed 3 words and felt the hand and came back up into the air. Peter who has just had an experience that none of the other 11 men in this boat have had, who has not simply witnessed the miracle from a safe distance, but who has been inside it, who has felt the water hold him and felt it release him, and felt the hand close around his wrist in the dark. Peter is worshiping with the rest of them. Of course he is. But what Peter is worshiping is slightly different from what the others are worshiping. The others are worshiping the one who walked on the water. Peter is worshiping the one who reached down into it. There is a difference. And Peter will spend the rest of his life preaching from that difference. He will preach it in Jerusalem, in Antioch, in the cities along the coast of Asia Minor. He will preach it to Jews and Gentiles and soldiers and fishermen and slaves and merchants. He will preach it in chains, and he will preach it in palaces, and according to Eusebius, writing in the 4th century, he will eventually die for it, crucified upside down in Rome, at his own request, because he did not consider himself worthy to die in the same position as his rabbi. But before all of that, before Jerusalem and Antioch and Rome, before the chains and the palaces and the upside-down cross, there is this boat, this silence, this flat black water, and Peter, dripping, breathing, alive, falling on his face in the dark and saying the truest thing he has ever said. Truly, you are the Son of God. He knows what he is saying in a way the others do not yet. He has felt the proof of it on the inside of his wrist. Now we come back to the man who left something out. His name is Peter, and the story he left out is the one we just told. Here's what we know about how the Gospels were written, and this matters more than most people realize. Mark's Gospel, which most scholars believe was the first Gospel written, was not written by an eyewitness. Mark was not in the boat that night. Mark was not one of the 12. Mark was a young man from Jerusalem whose mother's house became one of the early gathering places for the church, and who later traveled with Paul, and who later still, according to Papias, a 2nd century bishop who collected the testimonies of those who had known the apostles directly, became the interpreter of Peter, Peter's interpreter, Peter's scribe, Peter's voice on paper. Papias writes, and Eusebius preserves his words, that Mark wrote down carefully everything he remembered of the things said and done by the Lord, but not in order, because he had not heard the Lord himself, but had followed Peter, who adapted his teachings to the needs of the moment and did not intend to give a connected account of the Lord's sayings. What Mark wrote, Papias insists, he wrote accurately. Everything Peter told him, Mark recorded faithfully. Everything Peter told him. Stay with me, because this is the part that should stop you cold. Mark's gospel includes the story of the walking on water. Chapter 6, verses 45 through 52. The disciples in the boat, the figure on the water, the terror, the ego Amy, the wind stopping, the worship. Mark includes all of it. Mark records it carefully, the way he recorded everything Peter told him. Mark does not include Peter getting out of the boat. He does not include the request. He does not include the word come. He does not include the walk, or the 11 steps, or the moment the wind hit Peter's face, and Peter looked down. He does not include the sinking. He does not include the 3-word prayer. He does not include the hand closing around Peter's wrist in the dark. None of it. Matthew includes it. Matthew was there. Matthew was in the boat. Matthew watched it happen with his own eyes. Matthew wrote it down. John was there. John was in the boat. John does not include Peter's walk either. But John was writing a different kind of gospel for a different kind of reader, and his omissions are their own sermon. But Mark who wrote everything Peter told him, Mark who was Peter's voice, Peter's memory, Peter's authorized account of the life of Jesus of Nazareth, Mark leaves out the part where Peter sank. Think about that for a long moment. Peter told Mark about the feeding of the 5,000. Peter told Mark about the boat, and the wind, and the long night of rowing. Peter told Mark about the figure on the water, and the word phantasma, and the terror in the boat. Peter told Mark about ego Amy, and the wind stopping and falling on their faces in worship. Peter told Mark all of it. And then Peter stopped. Right there. Right at the moment when the story became about him. Right at the moment when the camera, so to speak, swung from Jesus, walking on the water, to Peter climbing over the side of the boat. Right at the moment that would have made Peter look either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, or, as it turned out, both, in rapid succession. Peter stopped telling the story. Now, here is the question that has haunted careful readers of the Gospels for 2,000 years. Why? Why did Peter leave it out? Was he ashamed? Was he protecting himself from the embarrassment of having failed so publicly, so completely, so wetly, in front of 11 of his closest friends and his rabbi and the God of the universe? Was it humility? A deliberate choice to tell the story of Jesus walking on water without making it also a story about Peter? Here's the part nobody tells you. I think Peter left it out because he could not tell it without breaking. Not from shame, not from embarrassment, from the other direction entirely. Because some experiences are too close to the bone to narrate cleanly. Because some moments, the moment the water held you, the moment it didn't, the moment you went down fast into the dark, and the hand was already moving before you finished the prayer, Some moments live in the body, not in language. Some moments, when you try to put them into words for a student, or a congregation, or a scribe with a pen, the words come out wrong, smaller than the thing, thinner than the thing. Peter could describe the wind stopping. He could describe the worship. He could describe the faces of the other 11 men in that boat. But the wrist, the hand around the wrist in the dark, the immediate rescue, the euthios that pulled him out of the deep before the prayer was even finished, that was not a sermon illustration. That was the moment Peter's entire life turned on. That was the axle around which everything else rotated. You do not explain the axle. You build your life on it, and you preach from what it holds up. And this is what Peter understood. This is what Peter carried from that boat into every city, every prison, every palace, every moment of the rest of his life. That the hand does not wait for you to deserve it. The hand does not calculate the quality of your faith before it moves. The hand does not look at the 11 seconds you walked and weigh them against the moment you sank and decide whether the ratio is good enough for a rescue. The hand moves first. It was already moving. It has always been already moving. And Peter, old Peter, white-haired Peter, Peter who would die upside down on a Roman cross for the name of the one who pulled him out of the water, Peter knew this not as a doctrine, not as a theological proposition, not as a line in a creed. He knew it the way you know something that happened to your body in the dark. He knew it in his wrist. So what do we do with this night? What do we do with a boat full of exhausted men, and a black lake, and a figure walking toward them out of the dark, and a fisherman who climbed over the side and walked 11 steps on water, and sank, and came back up with a hand around his wrist? What do we do with a God who speaks his own name into the middle of our worst storm and calls it an introduction? 3 things. Just 3. The first is this. Jesus walked toward them in the thing they were most afraid of. Not around it, not above it, not waiting for them on the shore with dry clothes and a fire and a gentle explanation of why the storm had been necessary for their spiritual development. He walked into the middle of it. He came to them through the wind and the dark and the chaos-haunted water, at the worst hour of the worst night, when they had been rowing for 9 hours, and their hands had stopped feeling, and their eyes were raw, and every instinct they had was screaming that this crossing was going to kill them. He walked toward them through the exact thing they were afraid of. Think about what storm you are currently in the middle of. Not a metaphor, a real one. The phone call you are waiting for. The diagnosis that changed the shape of your future. The relationship that is 3 miles of open water and a headwind, and you have been rowing for so long your hands have stopped feeling the oar. The grief that arrived without warning and has not left. The thing you have been fighting since sundown that has not gotten any smaller, no matter how hard you pull against it. He is not waiting for you on the other side of it. He is walking toward you through the middle of it. At 3 a.m, in the 4th watch, in the dead hours when the mind plays tricks and the darkness has weight, and you cannot see the shore you are trying to reach. He is already on the water. He has been on the water, and he is moving in your direction. The second thing, come as an invitation, not a command. Peter could have stayed in the boat. Read the text carefully, and you will see it. Jesus does not reach into the boat and pull Peter out. Jesus does not make Peter do anything. Peter asks. Jesus answers. And the answer is one word that contains within it all the freedom in the world. Come, or don't. Step out. or stay. The water will hold you, or you can spend the rest of your life watching from a safe distance, dry and warm, and never knowing what the surface of the impossible feels like under your feet. The other 11 stayed in the boat. We do not judge them for it. The boat was reasonable. The boat was wood and pitch, and something you could put your weight on without requiring a miracle. The boat made sense in a way that climbing over the side into black water at 3 a.m, in a storm, toward a figure you initially mistook for a ghost, simply does not. Staying in the boat was the intelligent decision, the prudent decision, the decision that any reasonable person with a functioning instinct for self-preservation would make. But Peter got wet, and Peter walked. 11 steps, or 11 seconds, or 11 heartbeats. Whatever it was real, it happened. The water held him. And for one impossible stretch of time, a fisherman from Capernaum did the thing that only God was supposed to be able to do. Not because his faith was perfect, not because he had earned it, because he asked, and the answer was come, and he believed the answer enough to swing his legs over the side. You will not walk on water from inside the boat. The invitation is still open. It has been open for 2,000 years. It is open right now, in whatever moment you are reading or hearing these words, in whatever storm you are currently crossing, in whatever dead hour you have found yourself in. The word has not changed. The water has not changed. And the one who spoke the word is standing on the surface of the very thing you are most afraid of, looking in your direction, waiting to see what you will do. Come. The third thing, and this is the one that matters most, so stay with me to the end. When you sink, the hand is already moving. Not after you pray, not after you demonstrate sufficient faith, not after you have proven that the ratio of your walking to your sinking is good enough to merit divine intervention. Before. The hand moves before the prayer is finished. The hand moves. It is almost possible to believe. Before your mouth opens at all. Immediately. Euthios. The Greek does not allow for any other reading. There is no delay in this story. There is no moment where Jesus watches Peter go down and thinks about it. The hand was already moving. This means something enormous. It means the rescue is not a reward for the walk. It means the 11 steps Peter took on the water were not a deposit he made against the moment he would need to make a withdrawal. It means the hand around the wrist in the dark was not payment for services rendered, was not a grade given for effort, was not a response calibrated to the quality of Peter's performance. It was grace, immediate, unearned, already in motion. And here is the part that should carry you out of this video and into the rest of your day, or your week, or your year, or your life, wherever you are in the crossing. Peter sank. Peter, the one Jesus would later call the rock on which he would build his church, the one who would preach at Pentecost and see 3,000 people baptized in a single morning, the one who would heal the lame man at the beautiful gate, the one who would carry the name of Jesus into houses and prisons and palaces across the Roman world. Peter sank. Publicly. Completely. In front of everyone. And the hand was already moving. Which means this. Which means exactly this, and nothing less than this. Your sinking is not the end of your story. Your sinking is not the verdict on your faith. Your sinking is not the definitive evidence that you should have stayed in the boat, that you were foolish to ask, that the word come was not meant for someone like you. Your sinking is the moment the hand becomes visible. Your sinking is the moment you discover that the rescue was never contingent on the walk. 3 words are enough. They were enough for Peter at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee in the fourth watch of the worst night of his life. They have been enough for 2,000 years of sinking people in every language and every century and every kind of storm. They are enough right now, in whatever water you are currently going down in. Lord, save me. The water did not care about Peter's faith. It never does. But the hand did, and the hand is already moving.